Good morning, Doc Ryan here. Today I want to talk about Nicodemus. Nicodemus is found in John 3, and it's the story that I think most of us know. This guy comes to Jesus and talks to him, and Jesus says, you pretty much have to give up everything, and he walks away. And I've always kind of wondered, is that the whole story? What's the Bible trying to say? And it always felt like it was kind of an unfinished part. Like there's got to be more to it. And it was until just recently that I really kind of discovered the whole thing. You see, the Bible is not like a modern day novel. There's not a lot of character development, like some novels spend half the book developing the characters before they get to the storyline, and the Bible doesn't really do that. The characters more complement the main story of the Bible. So today I want to share with you a little bit more about Nicodemus. So Nicodemus is a respected Pharisee, and he comes to visit Jesus at night. And I always kind of thought that was a little bit off, but then I read the whole scripture in context, and what happens right before this? Jesus goes to the synagogue or temple and overturns all these tables, and that was directly kind of towards the Sadducees and maybe even Pharisees, and it probably came off a little bit crazy to those people, but it obviously is making them think. So Nicodemus comes to Jesus at night because he wasn't really sure about this Jesus guy or the Jesus thing, and so he didn't want anybody to know. So he comes to Jesus at night and he poses this question. You see, there's also this element of darkness and lightness, and we see this in the Bible all the time, and it's not just the matter that Nicodemus came to him at night, but it's the idea that Nicodemus at this point in his life was in the dark. And that's really important with the story. So we kind of see him coming, and he comes to Jesus and he has this conversation with Jesus, and then he leaves. It's kind of like Jesus poses this thing, and in John 3 we read it and we kind of go, yeah, Nicodemus wasn't there yet, he wasn't quite ready. And so that leaves us going, what does this story say to us? And I think to most of us, it just kind of said there were people that weren't ready to give it up for the Lord yet. But what I like about it is you see this cycle that Nicodemus is exploring options. He's open to the idea of Christ and what Christ has to offer. And so he comes, and you can see that the wheels are turning, but he's not quite there. There's been all kinds of statistics about how many times you have to talk to people about the gospel before they accept it. And most people, I think Barna put a survey out there that said it was 7 times. But the point is, it's a process, and typically people that are more logically oriented, it takes longer for them to come to that moment, but when they do, they're oftentimes the most solid or the most on fire, and it sticks. They're not the ones that traditionally do this for a few years and then walk away, if that makes sense. So we kind of pick up here, and the English translation of this kind of makes Nicodemus look a little dumb, and he just kind of walks away. In the original text, it makes a little more sense, but that's not really what I'm talking about today. I kind of want us to put ourselves in this position of reading the text, and we're kind of reading it, and we get to this point, and Nicodemus walks away. And most of us, the unfortunate part is that's the end of the story. That's what we read in Sunday school, and that's kind of like the Sunday school teacher says, see, not everyone is going to come to that knowledge or something like that. But the thing about it is it's not the end of the story. So that's what I want to share next. You see, most people end there, but in John chapter 7, we see his name again. You might remember that the chief priests send out the temple police to arrest Jesus, and they came back without him. And I can only imagine that the Pharisees were besides themselves. And so we see them, and they're saying what happens, and then what we hear is Nicodemus speak up. And I remember just reading through John chapter 7 about something and seeing his name, and it's like, I've been a believer my whole life. I've read the Bible straight through more times than I can count. Yet I saw his name, and I kind of said to myself, you've got to be kidding. and that opens the door for more. So basically, Nicodemus steps up and he says, let's give him a hearing. Let's give him a safe hearing. And the significance here is that this is in broad daylight. This is in front of all of his friends and everything else. And he stands up, and it's not like he's proclaiming his everlasting love for the Lord, but he says, let's just give him a hearing. It's a public profession, which is really important here. So people always want to say, well, was he saved? Does that mean he had given his life to the Lord? I don't want to go there, but what it was, I know for sure, was he had been thinking about this conversation with Jesus, and it was a first step. If he didn't care at all, he wouldn't have said anything. But he said, let's just give him a hearing. And maybe he was just a very fair, even-minded person, but it shows progress, and it likely shows a first step towards Jesus. Now here's the neat thing. The story is not over here. Not just 2 instances of Nicodemus, but there's 3. John 19, Jesus has already died on the cross. Joseph of Arimathea comes and asks for the body to bury him. And who else do we see? We see Nicodemus bringing 100 pounds of myrrh to bring to the body of Jesus and perhaps anoint, as they often did with the dead. Now this is significant because 100 pounds of myrrh was very costly. To me, this is a relationship of love. You see, what happens is Jesus is crucified and Nicodemus comes bearing this great gift, but it's myrrh. Remember when we hear about myrrh before, that was when Jesus was born. And so when he was born and when he is dead, we bring myrrh. That was known in the Old Testament for kings and priests. And so it's an amazing act that we see Nicodemus, because what I think the Bible is showing us is an act of priestly royalty. And we get that throughout the Bible over and over with Jesus. And for Nicodemus to not only accept that, but also take the further steps to show that publicly, that was amazing. Now, I don't know about you, but to me, that sounds like an intimate love. And that's what God is asking of us in our lives, is intimate love for Him and the things that He brings to us. So when I look at the story of Nicodemus, people get wrapped up, was he saved? Did he come? I look at the intimacy of love. That's what God is asking for. I don't like to get caught up in this born again thing, because if we're in an intimate relationship with the Lord, if our hearts and our action follows, that's what the Bible's asking for. That's what He wants of us. And then it's not a question of, are we born again? Is this salvation? We just know that we are with the Lord. I love this story of Nicodemus, and hopefully this will impact you today. God bless.